to the entertainer talking sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to dive into the huge news of the day in the NFL world. And that, of course, is the news about J.J. Watt, one of the faces of the league, not just the Houston Texans, has been released by his football team, the same team he was drafted by. He will be 32 next year. He's 31 right now. And I think most of us thought and agreed that he was going to move on from Houston. We saw the writing on the wall. Nick Caserio's coming in there. They're going to rebuild. I don't care what he says about Deshaun Watson. This even makes it stronger, in my opinion, towards the case that they will be trading Deshaun Watson. Watson wasn't happy to begin with. He brought in a coach that he wasn't in love with. Now you're trading away one of your best players on the or releasing, I should say, one of your best players on the football team. I think it only shows that Watson will be traded. And if he isn't traded, well, you're going to get a very upset quarterback that more than likely will be holding out. And we'll have to wait and see how the rest of the offseason plays out. And we're going to start with the city of Houston, and then we're going to dive into Watt and why they did this and some of the destinations that he may end up with. But the city of Houston, man, I feel so bad for them as a sports city, right? You go back to the baseball team with the Houston Astros. You had the scandal there, one of the most embarrassing moments in baseball history. They end up losing George Springer on top of that this offseason, one of their best players who I wanted to go to my New York Mets. Then they end up in basketball with the Rockets, losing both James Harden and Russell Westbrook, arguably two of the top 10 players in the entire NBA. And now they're in rebuild there. And now with the Houston Texans, last year you lose DeAndre Hopkins. Now you lose J.J. Watt for nothing. You got basically nothing for Hopkins. Now you literally get nothing for J.J. Watt. And you're probably going to lose Deshaun Watson. So if I was a Houston fan, I'd feel a lot worse than I was a New York fan. And that says something, because we have not had much to cheer for in quite some time, but I feel bad for the city of Houston when it comes to their sports teams. As far as him being released, yeah, this is a shocker to me. I didn't think he'd be back with Houston, but I thought you could get something for him on the trade market. After all, he only had one more year left on his deal. I don't think it well, he only had 1 year left on his deal, so it would have been a 1 year rental. They could have got something for J.J. Watt. And I know some people definitely point to the injury history. They'll point to whether or not he could be a schematic fit in certain destinations. You could have gotten something for J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt is still a productive player. I know he only had 5.5 sacks last year. You go to PFF, if you look at the metrics, he had an 85 grade. He is still a very good all-around football player. Not to, in 2018, I think he had 16 sacks. He was an all-pro. He's not what he once was, but you could have got something for J.J. Watt. Believe me, and I completely understand Houston not bringing him back, especially with the shrunken salary cap and the fact that they're trying to do right by their player. But you could have gotten something for him. Now, reporters come out, the reason that Caserio and the Houston Texans, of course the new GM that they brought over from the New England Patriots, decided to cut him was because they were trying to do the right thing by the player. I am just going to say this. Nick Caserio is lucky that he didn't end up with the New York Giants. He was a name that a lot of Giants fans wanted this offseason, and I agree that you can't really blame him for doing the right thing by the player, whatever it may be. Giants fans would not have wanted to hear that. If you cut, one of, Saquon Barkley, let's just say, since he's the face of this franchise, not to compare the two because Barkley's younger, but let's just say Watt was on the Giants, and he cut Watt here, he would have gotten destroyed, regardless of how right it is for the players. Fans would have wanted him to get something for him. And I'm sure that Houston fans probably feel the same way, although I'm sure that they're still happy for their legend and defensive end, J.J. Watt. He's a great guy. He is probably my favorite player in the entire NFL that outside of New York Giants. Of course, I'm always Giants first, but he's a class act. He would bring instant leadership to any team he ended up with, and I wish him nothing but the best. And if you're J.J. Watt at this point in time, I think he's a 5 or 6 time All-Pro, one of the greatest defensive ends in the history of football. Obviously, he's had some injury woes along the way, but if you're J.J. Watt, you only got one thing left to play for, in my opinion. You're going to the Hall of Fame. You got to get a ring. And, if you ask me what destinations make the most sense for him, Giants fans may not want to hear it. I don't think the New York Giants are going to be his ideal landing spot. Now, I'll talk about how he would fit with the New York Giants. As far as how he'd fit with the Giants, yeah, I think he'd be a schematic fit. He's played the 3-4 defensive end for a while here with the Houston Texans. He's not an outside linebacker, but would definitely play in that defensive end for the Giants if we were to bring him in. And he wouldn't cost that much, I don't think. You're not going to have to pay an arm and a leg for a 32-year-old defensive end that had the injury history that he has had, that just got released by his former team. But if I'm J.J. Watt, I'm looking for a chance to win a Super Bowl. And as a Giants fan, I would love to win a Super Bowl next year. But taking my Giants fan hat off, I look around the league and there's a lot other destinations that make a lot more sense for a player like J.J. Watt getting up there in age who's trying to chase a ring late into his career. And the two destinations that popped off the top of my head in terms of just fit for him naturally, where he'd probably want to be in terms of his upbringing, and teams that are in the thick of it to potentially win a Super Bowl. First team I'm going to say is the Green Bay Packers. You're talking about a team who had the best record in the NFC this past year. Of course, we all know that J.J. Watt went to college in Wisconsin, right? Preston Smith, I'm pretty sure from what I've read, more than likely will be cut. It would be a seamless transition to bring in a guy like J.J. Watt to add to that pass rush for the Green Bay Packers. Not to mention he is an all-around player. They struggle against the run. I think it'd be a perfect fit for Watt and the Green Bay Packers. Watt wants a Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers gets some help. It gives them a better opportunity to win a ring next year, and he would definitely step right in and play meaningful football in January, which should be the mission for J.J. Watt. The other team that makes a lot of sense, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with the quarterback over there, but his brother plays there as well, and you're talking about a team that went to the playoffs. They go to the playoffs every year, one of the best organizations in all of football, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like I said, T.J. Watt will be back. I know he's a pending free agent. The Steelers are going to bring him back, and who better to pair him up with than his brother, J.J. Watt, if you could get him on a short-term contract at an affordable rate. Of course, Bud Dupree went down with the injury. More than likely will not be back with the Steelers. If I had to guess, I can't see them extending Bud Dupree this year. I think he makes a ton of sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. And like I said, they're competing year in and year out to win a Super Bowl, something that J.J. Watt should be looking for at this point in his career. And there's a number of other teams you could look at that are potential Super Bowl contenders where he could fit. I think he fits in almost any scheme because I think he's capable of playing both the 3-4 and 4-3 defensive end. So the Bills, for instance, make sense to me. The Bills are a team that went to the AFC title game last year. They don't really have a supreme edge rusher. That's kind of the one thing they're lacking in that defense. The Bills make a ton of sense. I don't know if we want to go there. It's not the most desirable location in terms of weather and things like that, but they make a lot of sense if he's trying to win a Super Bowl. If the Colts were to get a quarterback, they could make a lot of sense. Not to mention he'd get to play against his rival in the Houston Texans. The one thing I'll say about the Houston Texans is Bill O'Brien should be locked up and not allowed to enter the state of Texas for the rest of his life because what he did to that football team is it's not forgivable. If you're a Houston Texans fan, it is that bad. It's to the point now where the biggest name in the history of your franchise requested a release, and now you're going to be forced to trade away your franchise quarterback, one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, in Deshaun Watson. As far as what the Texans did, doing the right thing by him, more power to him. New York fans wouldn't want to hear that. They would have wanted to get something for J.J. Watt. But Caserio off to a rocky start. But if you were Caserio, you had to know what you were getting into. It's why I never understood why he took the job to begin with. It's a horrible situation, and they're going to have to build that thing up from the ground up. And if you're a Houston Texans fan, that's the right approach at this point in time. You should be trying to get as many draft assets as you possibly can to try to get Houston back to relevancy maybe by 2023 or 2024. But next year, you'll be picking in the top 5 in the draft in 2022 if you ask me. Long way to go if you're a Houston Texans fan. I would love him with the New York Giants. I think he'd be a perfect fit. I think he'd bring leadership, and maybe he will view us as a place that he'd like to end up. Maybe Joe Judge could sell him. Who knows? Do I think it'll happen? No. Do I have my fingers crossed? Absolutely. But I think he goes to a contender. I think he goes to a team that is better equipped to win a Super Bowl. And if I had to pick one team, I think it'll be the Green Bay Packers. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.